Hey everybody, Jay Weidner, Reality Check, hit like and subscribe and all that. And kind of a special show today, kind of out of the unusual, because I have as my guest Ryder Lee, who is most famous for directing JFK X, solving the crime of the century. Hey Ryder, how you doing?
How's it going, Jay? An honor and a privilege to be with you here today, my friend. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so back when we were making JFK X, I remember having dinner with you or something, and I said something like, expect some weird stuff to occur after the film comes out. And I couldn't tell you what because I didn't know what, but I just knew that this was going to elicit, that film was going to elicit some kind of weird response. So the film went up on Amazon Prime and a few other platforms on July 11th. On September 10th, almost exactly 3 months later, is the announcement, or I guess the interview in the New York Times, of the Secret Service agent who was supposedly riding on the foot of the car behind JFK, whom we really can't see in the Zapruder film at all. And now in fact, I'm gonna cut to this. I'm gonna read this article, or at least some of it, from the Daily Mail. Secret Service.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, it's really interesting that after 60 years, this gentleman, Paul Landis, just now decides to come out about his involvement with the magic bullet. It's really interesting timing. And like you said, and like you mentioned, we've said on several interviews that there's going to be more evidence that's going to be coming out up until the 60th anniversary, which happens this November. And
Yep.
I think that Paul Landis should be prosecuted. That's just
Oh,
what I
I
think is going on here.
completely agree. So let me go through this and then we get into that because I think he should be prosecuted too. I guess there's a, what do you call it, the length of time or whatever, but still, this it's really disturbing. And it's well, let me just read this for anybody who doesn't really know what's going on. A former Secret Service agent was present at President Kennedy's assassination has come forward with a new claim that would debunk the magic bullet theory and raises question about whether there was a second shooter. Paul Landis, 88, broke his silence on Saturday, nearly 60 years after Kennedy was shot dead in a motorcade passing through Dallas, to share his bombshell recollection with the New York Times. Landis, who in 63 was a young Secret Service agent assigned to protect First Lady Jackie Kennedy, said that in the chaos following the shooting, he picked up a nearly pristine bullet sitting on the back seat of the open limousine, which means it had to have been at the hospital because we know it drove away. It was just behind where Kennedy was. It was just behind where Kennedy was sitting when he was killed, he says. Landis said he took the projectile and placed it on the president's hospital stretcher to preserve it for the autopsy investigators. That bullet, the first piece of evidence logged in the murder investigation, has for 6 decades been said to have been found on the stretcher of Texas Governor John Connally, and was hypothesized that to have fallen from a wound to his thigh. Landis thinks the bullet may have rolled onto Connally's stretcher from Kennedy's while they were next to each other. That's a stretch. It is long been known as the magic bullet. The bullet that supposedly passed through Kennedy's neck from the rear, then entered Connally's right shoulder, struck his rib, exited under his right nipple, passed through his right wrist, and hit his left thigh. Yeah. But
Wow.
Landis's assertion that it had been actually exited Kennedy in his Cadillac could lay waste to the magic bullet theory and bolster the claim that Lee Harvey Oswald did not operate alone. And we have some photographs, and then according to the Warren Commission, Kennedy was killed by a lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, who fired 3 shots at the motorcade from the 6th floor of the Texas book with a 6.5 millimeter Mannlicher Carcano rifle. According to the report, one of the shots missed the motorcade. Another was the magic bullet that struck both Kennedy and Connally, and the final round fatally struck Kennedy in the head. Now Landis says he believes the bullet he retrieved from the limo may have been undercharged and dislodged from a shallow wound in the president's back, falling back onto the limousine seat when the fatal shot hit his head. He theorizes that after he placed the bullet on Kennedy's stretcher, it may have fallen onto Connolly's stretcher when they were jostled together. It is also possible that the hospital staffer who found the bullet and handed it over to the Secret Service misidentified which stretcher it came from, or that his account was mangled by investigators. The bullet, which had been fired, was nearly fully intact. No, it was fully intact. That is BS. There was not a scratch or a chunk of anything missing from that bullet. It was positively matched to Oswald's Mannlicher Carcano through ballistics analysis. But if Landis's claim is true, that suggests a bullet tagged as evidence Q1 was not responsible for the injuries to Connolly, and there was no so-called magic bullet. Almost done here. James Robinault, an attorney and historian, I'd like to find out what his real background is, who worked with Landis on a book he plans to release in October, believes the new account suggests the possibility of multiple shooters. If what he says is true, which I tend to believe, it's likely to reopen the question of a second shooter, if not even more. If the bullet we know is a magic or pristine bullet stopped in President Kennedy's back, it means that the central thesis of the Warren Commission, the single bullet theory, is wrong. The infamous Zapruder film shows that there was roughly a second between the physical reaction of Kennedy and Connolly to being shot. Yes, there was.
Okay. And we show that in the film.
Yeah, we show that in the film. All right, so I'm not going to bore you anymore with it. But basically, he's saying this agent is saying that he heard the shots. So I heard the shots. So what this is looking like is, and I don't know anything about this guy, what his background is anymore. He quit right a few months afterwards, after the assassination. He quit the Secret Service. But this looks like an attempt to discredit our film, is what I'm thinking. And that it doesn't really discredit our film, though. It just throws more garbage into the heap to confuse everybody and everything. Because here's the thing about the bullet. It had no blood on it. Unless he wiped the blood, he's not telling us. Did he destroy evidence, on top
well, he planted evidence, so he might as well have destroyed evidence as well. I mean, how can you go 60 years without telling anybody that you put a bullet on the stretcher with JFK? How is that even possible? The dude should be prosecuted for tampering with evidence and for obstruction of a crime scene.
Absolutely. There's about 10 crimes this guy committed, and they're not talking about any of that. How unbelievable it is that he would find evidence, the bullet that may or may not. It's not his job to figure out if that bullet killed Kennedy or not, and it's not his job to speculate that it came out of his back. He doesn't know any of that. This is just raw speculation. The real point is that there was no damage to that bullet, and there was no blood on that bullet. All right. So I would say that he was involved and that he planted the bullet, and he walked into the hospital with this pristine 6.5 millimeter and dropped it on maybe even the wrong stretcher. We don't know. And he was Jackie's, probably one of Jackie's top Secret Service agents. So he actually worked with the family. He went to Greece in October of 1963 with Jackie while she visited Aristotle Onassis, her soon-to-be husband, right? He was there the whole time. He actually babysat the kids on the island with her. I looked into his background. He was very familiar with the family. He ate dinners with them. And then, he quits just a few months after the incident, right? Which is kind of strange that you're 28 years old and you worked your butt to get to this position, and why would you quit? And that's very strange too. And I can't say, this is all speculation. I don't know, but I know that 3 months is more than enough time to write a book. I know that. I ghost written many books in my life, and I've written books in 60 days. If I've already got the plot and I know exactly where everything is going, it's really just a rudimentary, like a carpentry job. It's just putting the 2x4s up and getting it all done. So it's easy. And these intel agencies have reams of writers working for them, putting out counter info. And so
And also, if this is true and he did plant the bullet, then that means that the Warren Commission's investigation is even more botched than what we showed in JFK X, Solving the Crime of the Century. We already showed you that the Zapruder film has been altered several times. And if this is true, and him saying that he planted this bullet, and that bullet was basically the whole, where the whole theory came from.
yep.
Right. So if the bullet is planted, then that means that the Warren Commission's whole theory of what happened is even more wrong than we originally thought that it was.
And he sat on it the whole time. That's even more incredible, to sit on that kind of information. That bullet shouldn't have been touched. He should have called in the FBI. They would have come in. They would have not touched that bullet. It could have had fingerprints on it. You don't know. He just completely botched the outside of the Zapruder film. The single most important piece of evidence in the whole Kennedy assassination is now just called into question on everything. And I personally believe that this is a counteroffensive to the film. I really do. I've seen this happen before, and I'm going to bet, because I'll buy the book when it comes out in October. I'll bet it's really rushed. I bet the writing job is a really rushed job, which will be the indication that this was a major freak out that started probably on July 12th, 2023, as they all ran for cover, because they just don't want it all to come out, and it is going to come out. But in some ways, first off, I don't believe his story that he found it on the seat. I don't believe his story at all. I believe that he just planted it, because first off, when did he see it? He's not really very clear as to when he saw it. He could not have possibly seen it in the Zapruder film. He isn't anywhere around. So
yeah, the only Secret Service agent we see in the Zapruder film is Clint Hill.
Yep.
Climbing on the back of the limousine.
Yeah. Yep. And so I don't know what he's doing is he, through his narrative, he says, I was riding in the car on the footstep of the old cars used to have, and I heard the shot, and I turned around to look. Right, so he's like, this is like brand new evidence confirming that there were shots going off. Right, now we have somebody who says they reacted to the shot going off. Right, then he heard the second shot go off. Right, and he reacted to that shot going off also. He says. So we're saying in the films that nobody reacts to the shots, and nobody can hear any shots. And he's refuting those two really important points that we're trying to make. Okay, so that's the first thing that has to be kind of called forth here. And then he somehow is acting as if he was like right there and saw the brains flying out. He says he saw the brains flying out. So he's now confirming that the brains flew out, right? Which is, again, so 3 points of most important points that we try to make in our film, he is literally refuting with this story. And admitting that he broke the law, several laws actually, in the crime of the century. He's willing to come forth and say that I'm a lawbreaker, although none of the news articles ever point this out. Not one yet has pointed out that this is, destroying evidence, or not destroying, manipulating evidence. And it should have been, I am absolutely sure that they are taught in the Secret Service Academy that you're not supposed to touch evidence in a murder.
Well, that's not the only thing that they messed up with on the whole investigation. The FBI and the Secret Service both did reenactments of the JFK assassination. And during one of those reenactments, they literally used the gun that was Oswald's Carcano rifle.
They couldn't even.
They used the rifle that was supposedly used in the murder of JFK for the reenactment. What kind of nonsense is that? You're going to use the actual supposed murder weapon? That's evidence for your reenactment? Why would you ever do that? Makes absolutely zero sense. And this whole thing with the bullet actually kind of does enforce our the statements and the things that we talk about in JFK X, solving the crime of the century, and the fact that there wasn't any gunshots fired that day, right? We talk about that in the film. And if he planted this bullet, it's a pristine bullet, right?
Yep.
And I don't think people realize how bullets work. There's a shell casing around a bullet, and then when the bullet's fired, the bullet comes out of the shell casing. But the shell casing was around the bullet that was found on the stretcher. Like, how can you say that that was a fired bullet? And Paul Landis is now saying that he found it lodged, I think, in the back seat of the limousine. That's what it says in that article. But there's another article that I read that stated that he said that he thought that the shots weren't gunshots, that they were firecrackers.
Yes. Now that is also about several witnesses say that they thought somebody had lit firecrackers behind the grassy knoll. And I think that's actually somebody did. I think it was all part of the Psyop, that they had somebody planted back there who had little small black cats or something, and just let them off right at the moment, just to cause more confusion and everything. But when I heard the audio of that the Warren Commission said 3 shots were on, I could say that there could have been some firecrackers going off in the background. I really could, but not gunshots. Nothing piercing, just like that, right? Like, so I don't know, but I know that here's the thing: the Secret Service is in on it. We show it in the film, so the Secret Service is getting their name kind of smirched here, and so they're taking action to make sure that that enough disinformation is thrown out there right now that the credibility is gone from the film. And it's not going to be, because it will stand the test of time. It already is. But that's what they're hoping with this. And I would look for some more things too, to be honest with you. I would look, these 88-year-old witnesses, it's like like giving money to the Holocaust survivors in Ukraine, wait a minute, how old are they? You know what I mean? It's like, holy crap, you have to be at least 150. And so, bringing out this old guy, nobody's going to arrest him and nobody's going to criticize him. The fact that nobody's bringing up the fact that he altered evidence in the greatest crime ever, nobody's even bringing it up. So they're giving him a free ride. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, was because I don't want him to have a free ride. We need to bring these questions up. And we can't just let this guy go out there and say a whole bunch of statements unchallenged, especially when it's absolutely a fact that he broke a whole bunch of laws and really messed up the investigation, frankly, really messed it up. So,
we show in JFK X, Solving the Crime of the Century, how screwed up the investigation already was, with the alterations from the Zapruder film, the missing frames, 4 missing frames in the Zapruder film, No one was ever made to come forward about how those missing frames came to be, how they got there. And then with this, it's like it's just another thing thrown in there with all of the another muddying of the waters. It's
Yep.
more muddying of the waters, and to throw people off of what I think that we discuss in our film, right? And I think it's people really need to realize that whenever conspiracy theorists discover that they're a part of a conspiracy theory to use conspiracy theorists to spread disinformation about conspiracy theories, that's really what's happening here. And this is the inception of the conspiracy theory. And when you go back and you realize that all this stuff is flawed and everyone is wrong about everything, all the creations of all the theories that they've come up with, just like 60 years later, we're just now finding out supposedly that the magic bullet really wasn't a magic bullet. But that's what the Warren Commission used. They used the Zapruder film, which was altered, as their timeline of events to figure out what happened. And now they're using a planted fake magic bullet that a Secret Service agent laid in the stretcher of JFK. How more convoluted and nonsensical can you get? No wonder conspiracy theories are so easily propagated and take on a life of their own. And they just get compounded upon time after time after time. A new generation of people come along and then they just compound all of their theories on top of old pre-existing theories and then create their new thing when none of it's right. Sorry, a little rant there.
And you know, the incongruities that we point out in the film, like the autopsy pictures as opposed to the Zapruder film, right? So that's what's got them worried, is the incongruities that we keep pointing out. And so if they can muddy the water and create another round of conspiracy theories, because that's what this is going to do now, create another boring round of, oh, there must have been another shooter somewhere, you know, the Daltex building or somewhere, right? Well, I mean, you see the Zapruder film. Does Kennedy expose his back to anybody? No, his back's not exposed. Exactly. And where in the autopsy does it say that Kennedy has a wound to the back? Because I'm pretty sure the autopsy doesn't have that. So what's he talking about? You know, the evidence doesn't show that. The evidence, the Warren Commission doesn't talk about a wound to the back. There's a wound to the neck and a wound to the head. That's what they said, right? And that's exactly what you see in the autopsy pictures. You see a wound to the neck and a wound to the head. In the Zapruder film, you see no wound to the neck and a wound to the right side of the head. So all these incongruities were pointed out in JFK X, and I think they had to send the damage control squad out as fast as they could. When I put out Kubrick's Odyssey, Kubrick at Apollo, in 2011, I remember they put out a documentary about Apollo about a year later, the Great Desolation or something, right? Brian Eno wrote the music, and you know, and this was a big production, and you know, and without showing in that documentary, they hardly showed any film of the astronauts on the moon, because if they did, you all see what I was saying, right? So they just had long interviews with the astronauts without showing them on the moon. So it was just a disinformation campaign, and that's what this is going to be. And I'm going to say that we're going to see at least two more documentaries that are going to be disguised as documentaries, but are really going to be veiled attacks against what we show in JFK X. And I really think that's going to happen.
And it's something to keep leading the community on. It's exactly like what you said. It's something to keep everybody on the hook about, because unfortunately the conspiracy community and the truther community has become an industry.
Yes, it
It's
has.
an industry. It's a way to make money. It's very little truth and evidence or proof backs up any of this stuff, and it just keeps getting pushed out there. It's exactly like the UFO community and ufology. It's they keep reverting back to a singular event like Roswell, like that's their go-to all the time, every single time. It's Roswell, and it's the exact same thing with the JFK assassination. Now they're reverting back. They're changing their story. They're switching it up just a little bit just to keep all the conspiracy theories going, because I believe that we literally legitimately solved it. And what's in that movie, JFK X solving the crime of the century, is the reason why the JFK files are never going to be released.
That's right.
They're never going to release them. That's what was in those files. And I think that also that was a way during the Boston bombing as well to destroy some of the evidence of that at the JFK Memorial
Oh,
Library.
go into that. Let's go into that. Tell us, what are you talking about?
So during the Boston Marathon bombing, a few people they don't realize that there was a third bomb that went off. Two apparently went off at the Boston Marathon race, but there was a third bomb that went off. A very little well known event that happened, but you can Google it and you can look at bombing at JFK Memorial Library, and you'll see. And they tried to kind of cover it up by saying that it was just a fire, but there's a police chief that made a statement right whenever it happened that said that there was another bomb that went off. She was on the radio, said there's another bomb, a third bomb that went off at JFK Memorial Library at the archives department.
The fact
Why
that
would
we
there
don't
be?
know, the fact that we don't know about this, are you kidding? The same day as the Boston Marathon bombings, the JFK Memorial Library is bombed, and we don't know about that. That should be bigger news almost. Well, I guess people died at the marathon, but still, that should be big news, and it's not. So there must
And
have
very
been.
little information is on that as well. It's very difficult to find information, but it absolutely 100% did happen, and it is factual information. And why would they do that? Why would they bomb the archives department of the JFK Memorial Library unless they were trying to get rid of some evidence? Unless there was some kind of mind-blowing evidence that was in the JFK Memorial Library. Someone needs to go through there and go through those documents that are still left to see what's missing, to try and figure out exactly what got destroyed, to try and figure it out. But I believe that they were legitimately trying to get rid of evidence that could possibly come out in the future, and they realized it, and the only way that they could do it was blow it up and bomb it. And they used the cover of the Boston Marathon bombing in order to take out the JFK Memorial Library.
Man, ooh, I tell you what, I know a lot about the Boston Marathon bombing. Dave McGowan of the Laurel Canyon fame wrote an incredible series of essays on the Boston bombing. And what he did was he took two sets of photographs that were taken that day. There was two photographers there, and each one took like 40 photographs from two different angles, right? And he starts cross-indexing them. Man, there's something so wrong with the Boston bombing that I can't even begin to describe it. But I can't, because I'll get kicked off YouTube, so I'm not. So anyway,
Yeah, we should ask him if he knows about I'm sure he would have to know about the bombing at the JFK Memorial Library if he's researched it enough and looked into it.
I can't remember if he talked about that in his essay. I'll have to look it up again. He would not be the kind of guy that would miss something that important. But I never thought about it until you brought it up. I mean, I really never thought about that angle. But then again, what we did in JFKX is that we pulled out all of these weird nuggets that no one had ever brought up. like the fact that they exhumed the body in 1967, like the fact that none of the CBS, ABC, and NBC did not send camera people, although they did, to Dealey Plaza that day. Those are the kind of nagging things, I think, that really make the film so effective. And then, of course, showing audiences a 4K high quality version of the Zapruder film, where you can clearly see that there's no brains splattered on the back of everybody's wrong. Connolly says there was brains splattered all over the back. He didn't even turn his head to look. You watch his Zapruder film, he doesn't turn back to see what's on the hood of the car. He dives under the seat as soon as everything starts. So
do you remember when we were making the film and I was I called you and I was like, I'm watching the Zapruder film right now and I don't see Connolly or his wife. And I didn't realize that until I looked at it in slow motion. As soon as JFK's head explodes, they're nowhere to be seen. They're just gone. They're gone. They're not even there. They're not looking anywhere. They're ducked underneath the seat completely. So I thought that was really interesting because I was going through, because I sectioned out that little part of the video to put it in slow motion, to put it in the film. And I called Jay. I'm like, Connolly and his wife aren't in this footage at all. You raced over. You're like, no, they're there. They just ducked down underneath.
They're just on the floor.
Yeah.
Probably Connolly is laying on the floor and his wife's on top, you see, because he's got to be protected. He's the governor. No, just kidding. Yeah, and I think that's what makes the film so powerful, is that all of the little nuggets that we string together one after another of unknown things that people just never talk about, like the fact that nobody reacts to guns going off, and the fact that there's so many in the Tippit. No one ever brings up Tippit, and we do, right? And so there's that. I think that's what makes the film not only really powerful as a film, but I think also even today, 60 years later, they have to preserve the BS story. And that's what this is here. This is their first salvo in attempting to do a limited hangout by saying the Secret Service actually did something wrong, something unlawful that day. Inexplicably too, by the way. Why would he do that? What would be the point? Is his fingerprints on the bullet? Did he wear a glove? Did he put it on a kerchief around it or something? I mean, there's like, all this does is raise 100 other questions about everything, right? And the fact of the matter is that bullet had been fired probably from the Kirkconnell they found on the 6th floor, but it was fired into like a mattress or something that was soft stop it, not into hard bone, because it would be cracked. There'd be chips off of it. Anybody that's ever hunted would know that. So they just, he planted it. I don't know if he was working for the whole thing or working for the people, but I would say that he probably was aware of what was really going on that day, frankly.
Yeah, I think so too. And then the fact of not telling anybody that you did it. Why would you not tell your superiors or somebody else that was running the investigation that you found the bullet in the limousine and that you put it on the stretcher?
And who,
unless you're trying to cause more confusion and muddy the waters even more, than you would do that, right?
Yeah.
And then after 60 years, then finally coming out and saying that, I put that bullet on the stretcher, and that's what the Warren Commission is, and everyone's talking about this magic bullet when there wasn't any magic bullet. It makes absolutely no sense. Why would you do that? You're a Secret Service agent. You're like one of the highest agents in the government.
You're protecting the president's wife. I mean, you were a highly trusted guy, and this is what you would do. It's outrageous. It really is outrageous that nobody's calling him forth on any of this. And that's the main reason I wanted you to come on, because I wanted somebody to rage against the whole idea that this guy can be allowed to say he did this. I mean it. It's outrageous what he's saying.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's no explanation. And like I said before, you and I watched the Zapruder film probably more than anybody on earth at this stage. And I can tell you what, he never exposes his back until he rolls over at the very end. That's the only time that Kennedy exposes his back. All right. And that only for a second, because he's down underneath where you couldn't get him with a gun anywhere that you were. So, and I guarantee you, I've gone through all of the autopsy stuff. There is no mention of a wound to the back. There's a wound to the neck and a wound to the head. And so even the autopsy disagrees with this guy. So, and also if you just like that guy that's doing the UFO stuff right now, what's his name? Grush or whatever.
Grush.
Yeah.
Grush,
Okay. So
yeah.
if you actually listen to that guy and do a content analysis of the languaging that he is using, he's not saying anything. All right. He's not actually saying anything. And same thing with this guy. Oh, the bullet must have been lodged in his back and it fell out. Well, did you see the bullet lodged in his back? Or are you just making an assumption here? And since there's no wound to the back in the autopsy report, how do you reconcile that? And so I think that this guy needs to be questioned a lot more thorough than he has been so far.
Yeah, I think he needs to be questioned. I think he needs to be prosecuted. But just like you mentioned with David Grush, people aren't asking David Grush the hard questions.
No,
they're not asking him for proof and evidence for his claims that he's made about non-human biologics and non-human craft. Right? People aren't giving him the heat that he needs. I mean, he is literally in front of Congress telling people that the government has non-biologic
that means
bodies that they've recovered from a crash retrieval. Well, where is the proof and the evidence to back up those claims? Like, how are you going to sit in front of Congress and tell them a bunch of wackadoo nonsense stories that have been regurgitated in the community for decades now, that were inevitably made up by Richard Doty, the freaking disinformationalist from the Mirage Men that was going around giving disinformation to UFO contactees in the UFO community in the 70s and the 80s? You know, it's a regurgitation of a story, then is compounded upon, and then it gets to be accepted truth and mythology within the community. And everybody that talks about these topics has been guilty of this. Yep. They're talking about regurgitated information over and over, and that wasn't proven back when it was originally talked about it.
Oh yeah, I mean,
wild.
There's like the conspiracy community is doubling down. I'm sure you've noticed on all their conspiracy things, and that's fine. But we're right. I'm sorry, but the film is right, and the fact that there's going to be all this flack coming out trying to disprove it is just more proof that it's right. So, years will go by, and then it'll be accepted. And that's the way it goes. But this guy did a pretty good job of counterintelligence. I got to give him credit. It was actually a pretty good salvo. It's completely meaningless, and it's not going to work. But I think it's the best they could come up with. I really do.
And I think isn't he the last remaining Secret Service agent of that time?
Yeah, probably 28. So he had to be one of the younger ones. Yeah. The fact that he had really close ties to Jackie, I find to be quite telling, actually. Because you would want, the guys that you're closest to. So Clint Hill and he were the two closest Jackie's Secret Service agents, right? And they were both right there. In other words, they were at the front of the car, of the Secret Service car, following JFK's car, right? So they were the front witnesses, these two guys who were Jackie's pretty much her right hand Secret Service agents, right? So, yeah, you can take that with a grain of salt, but
I mean, if any of the government theorists and the conspiracy theorists want to come at us about this film, tell us what's on the side of JFK's face.
yeah,
Tell us what that is. What is that? No one's been able to come up with a good explanation of what that is. And I was back and forth a lot with making this film. I was calling Jay like every day. I was like, Jay, I don't know. I'm like, it might have been the CIA, it might have been the mob, because I'm doing all the research for it. And I'm realizing that the Kennedy brothers were legitimately going after the mob like hardcore. They were literally trying to take down organized crime, governmental organized crime. And I was like, maybe it was the mob. Maybe they really did kill him. And then once I got farther into the film, and then I'm really closely looking at the Zapruder film, the highest definition version of the Zapruder film ever made that's in our film, I seen it and I'm like, wow, this really was a huge fabrication. And I was back and forth on it just as well. And Jay can attest to that. But once you see the footage and what we're presenting, there's really no way around it.
yep.
Like, what can you come up with to disprove what we're showing you as evidence in the film? I mean, this would be the perfect way to do it, is to bring a Secret Service agent from 60 years ago that's like 83, 84, 85 years old.
88.
Talk about 88. Well, he's even older, 88 years old, to talk about that he planted a magic bullet, which then just, what we were doing is we wanted to come in and demolish all of the conspiracy theories that were surrounding the JFK assassination and actually solve the crime of the century. And I believe that we did.
You did.
But now they threw in this new piece of evidence that makes it seem like they're then solving the crime of the century in a way, right? Because it has to make everyone go back and
Start all over.
re-examine
Yeah.
and start all over again.
Just
When we
got
already did it. We already
Yeah.
did it like 3 months ago.
That's exactly right. And that's why I know that this is some kind of psyop, because of the way that the guy structures everything. And it's like a counter, not a very good counter, but a counter to our film, an attempt, like a counter punch. And it's a very weak counter punch, and it doesn't make any sense, but it was, hey, they did it. So
But how could they even let him come? How could they even let him come out with that? That's the thing that's baffling me. Like, how can a Secret Service agent come out and admit to a crime? Like, you're admitting to a crime right there.
I'm sure there's no statute of limitations on the assassination of the president of the United States. So he can be prosecuted, and he should be, actually.
Yeah, that's tampering with evidence. That's tampering with an active investigation, an active crime scene. Like, those are huge charges.
Oh, man. He altered history. He literally altered history. I want to ask you another question. Give us a list of names and times, it can be rough times, that you told other people this. I want to hear other witnesses come forth and say, oh, yeah, Paul told me that. Oh, yeah, right? Because why didn't you say something then, these witnesses that he told? So are you telling me that you didn't tell your wife or your best friend or anything for 60 years, that you just suddenly went to the New York Times and told them, and they decided to run with it? And no, not in the midst of the release of our film. Nope. Nope.
Then also the limousine being destroyed soon after the assassination. Like, why would they do that? That's prime evidence.
And as we found out after we made the film, the limousine that's at the Gerald Ford Museum in Michigan that they're saying is the Kennedy limousine isn't. It's a 4-seater. It's not a 6-seater. So I don't know what that is. Probably a backup limo that they had, and they put it in the museum. But no, it's not the same limo. It's close. It's a Cadillac, but it only has 4 seats. And when
Also, I don't think that the Time Life magazine pictures of the limousine isn't the same limousine either, right?
right, yeah, the picture that time 1 week after the Kennedy assassination, Time Life had a big, huge photograph of the Jackie's roses and the blood on the back seat of the limousine, but it's a 4-seater limousine in Time Life magazine. And those guys should be arrested for tampering with evidence too. As we prove in the film, they altered the Zapruder film. They removed at least 4 frames. So, man, so much tampering with evidence has been uncovered. It's amazing.
And it's just to serve to create more to convolute the story even more. And then you think, oh well, why would they do that? Why would they intentionally create why would they intentionally muddy the waters? Right. And I think
I have no choice.
it's for they don't they don't have a choice. They have to keep the whole thing going.
And you're going to see more of it. I'm going to bet you also that nasty stuff is going to start coming out about Aristotle Onassis. You watch. And I say that because once you go down this whole thing, what we're saying in JFK X, Solving the Crime of the Century, Aristotle Onassis becomes a much more important character, all right, than he was before, than just some rich guy who married Jackie. He now becomes something more important to the narrative. And it's important to know that he was one of the major contributors to the Kennedy campaign in 1960, by the way, was Aristotle. He gave millions to JFK to run for president. And of course, he was the one that sheltered Jackie afterwards. I've talked to several people from Greece who are like my age, and they said that they many times would talk to people who would go to Scorpios Island to work, maids and carpenters and whatever, and they would see 2 guys in wheelchairs, and one of them looked just like JFK. And if he did have Addison's disease, he would have been relegated to a wheelchair eventually. So, those are all speculations, but Ryder, it's been really good having you on. I wanted to get this out because it's just nagging at me, and I'm so glad I have this platform because more of this stuff's going to come out. So I'm going to be bringing you on every time they do a counterinsurgency. We're going to come back on, and I expect a bunch more. Especially as things heat up and the 60th anniversary approaches here. We're after Labor Day. So now this is going to be one of the major topics of conversation for the next 2.5, 3 months. And I want to make sure that our voice is one of those top voices. So get prepared for battle, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he committed an egregious crime. He tampered with evidence. He tampered with an active crime scene and didn't tell anybody about it. That he should be prosecuted. There's no other way around it. But they're not going to, because you said he was 88 years old. They're not going to prosecute an 88-year-old man, especially when he already has a book deal already ready, and the book was written by AI or written by the intelligence community.
Absolutely.
To put out some more and misinformation surrounding the assassination. But I really implored people just to watch the movie. It's going to be on 21 different platforms here soon.
It is.
It's going to be on Tubi, I believe, here soon, and on YouTube.
YouTube with ads. Tubi, of course, has ads. So it's free though, and it's international on those platforms. Well, Tubi is Canada, Mexico, Australia, and the United States. YouTube with ads is international. So you'll be able to watch it there. It's on Amazon Prime, but it's going to be on Apple Television. I'm going to put a list out of it, but weirdly enough, Film Hub, our distributor, has gone down for the next 2 weeks. I'm not sure what's going on there. So I can't even give you the list because I can't even check my account. So it's like Film Hub. What you're supposed to do is you write the software first, and then you do it at 3 a.m. Okay, you don't put the software up and do testing while we're sitting around wanting to look at what how things are going. So I'm a little disappointed in Film Hub right now. But
I
anyway,
think we crashed the servers there for a minute because there were several people that were hitting me up and telling me they couldn't access the film when it was first released. I think that they weren't expecting as many people to purchase it and rent it as we had, and that's amazing because it tells you how great the film was. And you know, right now you can find it on Amazon for $1.99 to rent and $4.99 to purchase. And I highly recommend doing that because, you know, we're just doing this out of our own pocket. We don't have any big production company behind us or backing us. And it's important to support independent filmmakers because that's the direction that things are going. Hollywood is collapsing right now. Netflix hasn't made any money. I don't think Netflix has ever made any money. They've been in debt this entire time. It's unsustainable. These streaming services are completely unsustainable, and it's going to switch at some point, and it's going to go to independent filmmakers. I absolutely 100% believe so. Thank you for the people that have supported so far and watched the movie and bought the movie or rented the movie. I really appreciate it. Just be on the lookout because we got two more films that we're going to be in the process of shooting here very soon. And you know, we're going to need your guys' support on that too, because this is how it's done. It's a grassroots word of mouth thing. And if you can't purchase it or you can't rent it, send it to your friends. Send it to your family members, put it in Facebook groups, just share it out on social media, anywhere and everywhere, because I guarantee someone will be interested in it. And thanks so much, Jay, for having me on. And anytime this kind of stuff happens, I think it's important to get out ahead of it and call it out. Yeah.
We have to. That's one of the main reasons I started the channel, was to call out on personal attacks, you know, or on my work, right? Because, you know, it was just happening all the time, and I needed to have a platform that made people who were going to come after me pause for a moment, because my platform is usually, you know, peopled by very active people, right? So anyway, thanks, Ryder. And the film is JFK X, Solving the Crime of the Century. You go to Amazon Prime and 21 different platforms. It's everywhere, literally everywhere. And please go watch it, and please get your friends to watch it. Please start discussion groups. And we have to counterbalance the things that they're doing, because, you know, they get the New York Times to do their interview. They get big publishing company to do their books. We can't compete with that. So Ryder's right. You know, we're small, but strong and mighty, and we shall defeat the beast eventually. All right, I'm Jay Weidner. Thanks for watching. See ya.